All right, I'm going to bring this meeting to order. Is there any public comment on closed session? Seeing none, we will adjourn to closed session. We have returned. We've returned from closed session and we have nothing to report out. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All board members are present this evening. Welcome to our visitors and our public this evening. Notice to the public, if you would like to make speak on an agenda item, please present a written request at this time. Non-scheduled agenda items will be introduced under section 10 on the agenda, and speakers will be limited to 3 minutes per topic at the discretion of the board president. Recognition of guests and presentations.
None this evening.
Correspondence.
Yes, 2 pieces of correspondence to share with you tonight, both from the Solano County Office of Education under the signature of Lisette Estrella Henderson, who is the superintendent of schools for our county. And the first one, and it's dated August 31st. This is the county office review of the 2021 to 2024 local control and accountability plan. And what this letter indicates, reports in the middle paragraph there is in accordance with education code sections, and there's the numbers. I have approved Dixon Unified School District's 2021 to 2024 LCAP. So this is just the formal notification that our LCAP was reviewed in the extensive process that the County Office of Education goes through, and that we now are official with our LCAP. It has been approved. In addition to the board approved it, and now we have the SCO approval as well. The second communication is dated August 26th, 2021. And this letter is County Office review of the 2021-22 budget. And this letter is an annual letter, again, under Lisette's signature, which is issued after the county office has reviewed the district budget that, again, you folks approved in June. So once again, a very extensive process. If you remember, back in August, we presented a 45-day budget revision that was at the request of SCO. We had a conditional approval on our budget, needing to have that revision completed by the date they provided. So having done that, our budget is now approved for 21-22 at this point in time. And just to touch on a few of the most notable parts of this letter, and some of these will be components of the FCMAT report here that we'll hear in a little bit. So the major elements concern about our multi-year projection and our ability to get through the out years, in particular 2022-23 and 2023-24, without making significant budget reductions. We, the board back last year adopted our fiscal stability plan, which made our commitment to take the necessary steps to remain fiscally solvent. And so this just notes that MYP issue. Second note here was on declining enrollment that we've been in since 2008, actually, is when our period of declining enrollment started. So the good news here is that year to year, so this year to this day last year, we actually have 52 more students than we did. So that's our first growth in enrollment in all those years. So that's promising. And the other note I would make, and this also impacts that multi-year projection, is we were very, very conservative in our enrollment projection for the budget that was just approved. And that was really as a safety measure in case we saw the kind of drops that we've had in recent years. And we didn't really anticipate having that kind of drop based on the new construction of homes in town. And happy to report that our current enrollment, which is 3,009, is 224 students beyond what we projected. So this has a huge impact on the coming out years, as long as we're able to maintain these numbers or hopefully even grow. Everyone's been talking about the fiscal cliff because we've been held harmless with regards to ADA, and this makes our cliff, if things hold, not even a cliff at this point in time. Will make a huge difference for the district. And again, we're going to be carefully watching the enrollment and doing a demographic study. Third point, the county is concerned, as we all are, about our ability to retain long-term staff in key central office positions. And a particular note here is our chief business official and the executive director of human resources, one of those two positions which is filled. And as you're aware, we're conducting, with the assistance of School Services of California, a salary study to help us make sure that our compensation packages are attractive enough to get candidates and then hopefully retain them as well. The FICMAT Crisis and Management Assistance team, and we're going to hear from them on a report here shortly, listed, I think it's 6 of the potential areas of risk to a school district. So we'll talk about those in just a little bit. And, the last major one that I would touch on, and this has been a long-term concern that the county has voiced to us, is our ability with our current staffing levels to conduct all of the business office functions that are necessary. In particular, that there's adequate staffing below the chief business official to allow that person to complete some of the higher level work, the long-term, bigger picture budget work that is necessary to make sure that we're remaining fiscally healthy. So we will continue to meet monthly with SCO in reviewing our budget, and appreciate that support and involvement from them. So given some of the details in the letter, I felt it was important to walk you through some of that, and I'll leave it at that.
Right, any board comments on our correspondence this evening? Any public comments on our correspondence this evening? All right. Moving on, I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion. And actually, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a second for the consent agenda. There's a motion and a second. And we're all in person, so all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I love being in person. Okay, one less roll call vote to do. Okay, items pulled from consent. We didn't pull any, and we are on stakeholder communications. I do not see anybody from the Citizens Oversight Committee this evening, nor do I see anyone from either of our employee associations. So we will move on to public comment. This is your opportunity for public comment if you would like to speak on a matter that is within jurisdiction of the district, but not on the agenda this evening.
Thank you.
Well, and I'm here too.
Well, good evening, President, board officers, and staff. My name is Jerry Castagnona. I am the new president of the Dixon Teen Center Board of Directors. I'm very excited about that right now, and I'd like to just touch on a few things just to give you a little update on what's going on. First of all, again, thank you guys for the support and the service to your community as a board member. People sometimes they overlook that and see that time and effort that it takes to be on the board. So I want to thank you for that. I want to share a little interest of my history with the Teen Center. 2012, 13, 14, 15, around that area. I was a volunteer at the Dixon Teen Center, and it was always fun to be there and help out the kids in any way I can. The place for them to be safe and enjoying themselves there after school. People would say, Jerry, what are you doing there at the Teen Center? As a volunteer, your kids are grown up, or here no more. They're everywhere. And he goes, I go, well, look, it's not about my kids, it's about the kids of the community, and that's the importance of this, to have a nice, safe place for them to play and enjoy themselves and have quality time with one another there. It's something that we need here in Dixon. I think it's very important. I'm sure you all understand that, and I just want to thank you for your support on that. As we all know, the pandemic has forced many suspensions and operations during this time. We're all looking forward to getting over all of this and getting everything back to normal. I get everyone to agree on that, that's for sure. We're looking forward to also launching the new Friday night basketball program at C.A. Jacobs. We were hoping to start in October, but we will need to push it back a bit. I wanted to get everything, of course, to get everything in order, and we don't have the proper date currently. There's some technicalities that we're dealing with right now, but a couple other things that we're working on is fundraisers. We have 2 fundraisers coming up. One is the Pinagogo Pinball Show, which is October 8th and 10th. And the other fundraiser that we're hoping to have, again, it's due to what's going on with the pandemic. But we have one lined up for January 21st. This is the evening with an Elvis concert. It's a fundraiser. It's just pretty nice. I'm sure we can relate to a nice evening there with an Elvis impersonator who does a very great job. So we're hoping to have that day on January 21st, and if tickets go well, then we may have a second on the 22nd. Other than that, I just want to say thanks again for supporting the Dixon Teen Center. And if there's any particular questions you may have, I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Any more questions?
You say the Friday night basketball is starting in February?
Yes. February, you're missing what's that again on February?
Friday night basketball?
That's what we're trying to work on. We're
Okay.
trying to work on February. We just can't right now. We're kind of holding it back. So there's just a few little technicalities we're working on to make that work. Yes.
So besides the Friday night, do kids get to meet every night or after school, every day after school, or?
Well, that's going to be determined on those are part of the technicalities that we have and what we want to work out at first. We don't know how and when we're going to actually get it going, but we're looking forward to getting that going. I know everybody wants to get out and do their thing, but we have to be very cautious on what's going on with the pandemic. So I don't have the actual dates or if it's going to be every Friday or not, but we'll definitely let you guys know and keep you in tune on what's happening.
But pre-pandemic, it was at the high school and one of the back rooms. Because I went there and people were sitting around playing and talking, and so that's not happening.
Well, that's
yet.
the basketball is what we want to get going again, and we just don't know when we're actually going to start that. So that's,
So it'd be mostly sports rather than study, conversation.
yeah, that can go on. I mean, I don't see why that is an addition. It's the basketball that we're really excited.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you
Thanks for
very
coming
much.
and filling us in.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. And just for the board and public's information, Adrian Lauder, who's our coordinator of student services. So she's the liaison for the district with the teen center. So she's been helping out in this, and it's certainly a transition period. Julie, you kind of identify, program prior to was this. That changed even when we began the work on John Knight campus. And we were able to accommodate with some rooms at the back end of the Dixon High campus, but that still was significantly different. And, my understanding is the teen center team is interested in doing everything they can in terms of programming, but it's a big lift. Yeah, and the financial part of it has always been a challenge, but I think hopefully the community and perhaps even the city of Dixon can support the program and get it back to, I think the basketball is a great place to start, but certainly that's not for everybody, and some other program additions would be great. But I just appreciate you coming in, Jerry, and giving us.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. All right. Any other public comment this evening? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to our first item, which is Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team FICMAT study results.
Great. So thank you, Catlin. So we have two guests with FICMAT, from FICMAT with us tonight, Shailene Hart and Andrea Dodson. And I'll just give a little bit of background because I think they're going to share with us as they talk about the report that the fact that we had three qualified budget certifications in a row under AB 1200 triggered this study by FICMAT. We had a voluntary one just a little bit over 2 years ago. So this was a repeat of that process, although we didn't include human resources in this one. And so tonight we're going to hear from them on outcomes of the analysis. And I think it's a blend of certainly some areas that we've improved and some areas of concern that remain. And so Shailene and Andrea, I'm not sure who's taken off first with this, but we can get you both unmuted or.
Hi.
No, I'm never here. If you can unmute yourself, but please welcome to our meeting, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm Andrea Dodson. I'm going to go ahead and introduce, we actually have two team members with us today, both Shailene Hart and Erin Lillibridge. But can you please enable my screen share?
Yep.
It says it's disabled. There we go. That looks good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the report and it should be sharing now. So as we go through and present this report, we just have the actual report that was provided in the board documentation for your reference, and we're just going to highlight certain areas, but it is the same report that you have. First, to provide a little bit of background, FICMAT, it's an acronym for the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team. We were developed back in, I want to say it was 1992, to aid and support fiscal oversight in county offices doing that work after some significant districts had failed financially and the state had to step in and assist them. And so initially we were developed to help provide additional support to county offices and those school districts that might find themselves in fiscal distress. Over time, our role has morphed a little bit, and we do provide other services. We do professional development or professional learning, we call it now. And we also do tool development. We do management assistance, which is when a district would call us in and invite us to look at a specific topic. The fiscal health risk analysis that you mentioned, that was mentioned 2 years prior, fell under that. It was an invite in by the district to come and do an assessment. There was some changeover in management, and just wanted to get a feel for where things were. This fiscal health risk analysis is a little bit different because it was triggered under the provisions from the 2018-19 Budget Act, which allows FICMAT to be more proactive in assisting districts. And instead of being invited in, for example, if there are certain activities that occur, then we automatically will start engaging and determine if there's value to come in and do this fiscal health risk analysis. There is no cost to the district for this fiscal health risk analysis, and it's provided by the state. And the results are in front of you today. I would like to really quick introduce our three team members. As I mentioned, we have Shailene Hart, who is our FICMAT Deputy Executive Officer. I always have to look that up, sorry. And we also have Erin Lillibridge. She's an intervention specialist. As I mentioned, I'm Andrea Dodson. I'm also an intervention specialist, and I was the job lead on this engagement. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start going through our report here. First, I'd like to note that our dates of fieldwork were March 29th through April 1st. This report is based on 2020-2021 first interim. That reporting period ends October 31st, and then the report is submitted to the county office after being approved by the governing board by December 15th. So that timeline, at this point in time, it kind of makes this information a little historical because the district has now gone on to do second interim and also adopted budget and closing out the books for unaudited actuals. But just as a reminder, this report is a snapshot in time of that budget period, first interim. So that report or that first interim was the trigger essentially for 3 consecutive qualified interim report certifications. There are 5 different conditions that could have occurred that would have caused FCMAT to engage the district to see if this would have been of benefit. The one that actually applied in this case was the 3 consecutive qualified report certifications. And basically, the district self-certified as qualified for second interim 1920, and then they also self-certified first and second interim 2021. When the district self-certified for second interim 1920, the county office concurred with that budget on the basis that the district would include expenditure reductions in that 2021 adopted budget. What ended up happening was on June 18th, the board passed a resolution committing, it was titled Commit to Implement Ongoing Budget Reductions to Meet the Board of Education's Fiscal Obligations in 2020-21 and 2 subsequent years, and identified dollar amounts to be included in the, I think it was the first interim report that would perform these reductions. In the first interim report, which is the one that this report was based on, the reductions were not detailed. They were included on a budget stabilization line, and they were not for the base year of 2020-21, but they were for the 2 out years, what had been identified. And then at November 5th, when the board did approve their 3-year stabilization plan, it was indicated that that would be included in the second interim details. And again, this report is based on that first interim. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. This graph here, I know there's lots of little columns, but if you look at the blue and the orange, these first 2 columns across here, you can see what the original reserves were going to be by amount. So in that first interim, what the original reserves were projected to be for each of the 3 years, that's the blue column. The required reserve, the minimum required reserve of 3% is the orange column. So you can see that in the base year, there was going to be a little bit more projected than than required. In the second year, it was pretty much equal. And in the third year, it's pretty much equal. And that was with the inclusion of those budget stabilization reductions. And that's why it basically comes straight across to, hey, what was the amount that we needed to identify? And then we'll figure out what those details are later. Just in a what if scenario, the gray and yellow columns, the third and fourth columns here for each of the years is what would occur had the budget reductions per that projection, had the budget reductions not been implemented. And as you can see, the base year is still the same because the base year didn't include any of those budget reductions. But in year 2, the district would have been slightly negative. And by year 3, the district would have been significantly negative with the reserve amount staying as per required. So really quick, going to circle back a little bit on that discussion about the prior FHRA versus this FHRA. The district absolutely made progress during the 2-year span in between. And the challenge that happens is that work goes on, right? And we change people, we change our processes, and we may be focusing on something over here on the left and improving those things, but sometimes other things are still evolving. And so while we did see improvements from that FHRA from 2 years prior, there were other areas that were now identified as of concern for areas of opportunity that the district can focus on in the future, just to really stabilize for the budget and move forward, and be successful. So really quick down here, we've got a little bit of information about how this tool is used. This tool is a defined set of questions, and basically FCMAT goes in and does interviews or looks at documentation to determine if the district is meeting or not meeting each of these items. In some cases, it may also be not applicable, but ultimately the tool has a calculation built underneath it. This tool is available on our website in Excel format. If you'd like to go in there and learn more about how it works, you can play with it. If you love Excel, some of us crazies do. But we have that information here as well, just to kind of highlight for today, which is there are certain items in this tool that will increase the score or increase the end result. So the tool actually has two outcomes. One is a risk score, which is a percentage, and I'll show you a little bit more on that in a second. But second is also a determination of risk, high, medium, and low. And so with the existence of some select conditions that are considered of higher risk, the resulting high, medium, low score can be elevated, but the percentage score is as stands. So let's look really quickly at the areas of high risk. There's two of them, but one is the very reason why FCMAT was invited in here, which was 3 consecutive qualified interim report certifications. By default, because this occurred, and it takes a period of time for this to occur, that automatically sets the district to a high risk level. But there's also a score that we can look at or that we will look at as well. But that's automatically going to set the district at high. If we scroll down, we have some other material weakness questions, and there were only 2 of these areas had the district not already been set as high that could have escalated the district to either medium or high, depending on the question. And that was, has the district addressed any deficiencies the County Office of Education has identified in its oversight letters in the most recent and 2 prior fiscal years? And if the district's cash flow forecast shows insufficient cash in its general fund to support its current projected obligations, does the district have a reasonable plan to address its cash flow needs for the current and subsequent year? How the tool also works is every time there is a no, you'll see right here in this area, we don't have any explanation, but that's because this is the summary, the material weakness questions. But as we go through the tool, you'll see that for every no that we have, whether it's something we're highlighting today or not, the detailed explanation is included in the report. So let's take one more look before we dive into those details and look at that score breakdown by section. Just a heads up, this works like golf. So basically, the lower the score, the better. So when we see something like annual independent audit report at 0%, that's not an area that we have concern with. That's actually an area that had no no's, so to speak. So I've highlighted the top 4 areas of concern here. Cash management was a 4.5%. Deficit spending of the unrestricted general fund, those are the dollars that you can use to pay for any educational anything in education, basically. That's 2.5%. Enrollment and attendance was 2.9%. Internal controls and fraud prevention was 5.1%. Leadership and stability was 3.3%. And you can see those percentages. If everything in here was a no, this score down here would be 100%. If everything was perfect, it would be a 0. You can see that these contribute to a total score of 31.8%. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the details underneath these underneath each of these areas. Under cash management, the big area of concern for us was that while the district in its first interim for 2020-21, while the district recognized that there was a potential cash flow concern because the state was doing deferrals, and we could see that there would be cash flow needs in May 2021 and then also May 2022 per the information we had at that time. The district hadn't developed a plan so for that to basically fill that. So not having a plan in such a short timeline, sometimes it takes, or oftentimes it takes time to not only figure out which plan is best for the district to borrow cash, but also to get that implemented. There are a few different ways that a district, there are a few different ways that a district can borrow cash. And basically anything that's outside of the district takes more time, whether it's from the county office or the county treasurer, or as a TRAN, tax revenue anticipation note. There's different costs, different timelines that need to be met there. Basically, the only thing that can really happen in a short timeline is the district borrowing from itself. And even that takes assessment and analysis to determine that will cover it. So for us to not see that the district had a plan was a concern. And so that was a no for cash management. In Section 8, deficit spending and the unrestricted general fund, basically what we found was that the district not only was deficit spending in the current year, but also projecting to deficit spend in the future years. Okay, I'm hoping that you guys can still see me. And you guys, okay, very good. I just had a VPN close on me. All right. So not only in the current fiscal year, but both of the 2 subsequent fiscal years, these would be spoken to in that multi-year projection report as part of first interim. But the other concern is the pattern that we were seeing from history as well, and that the district had also deficit spent in one of the prior 2 fiscal years. So it wasn't something that was new necessarily. It's something that potentially is an ongoing issue. And when we see this, the concern is, generally speaking, the concern is, does the district have in place the procedures and the controls in order to implement reductions? And that may be anything from identifying the details to actually getting them implemented. And we have lots of wonderful stories that we could talk about of districts that had struggles with that. But when we see this pattern, it does elevate the risk for a district. In enrollment and attendance, by the way, I'm happy to hear the news that we heard earlier, and I hope that continues. But as we looked over the district's history, what we found is that the district actually was declining in enrollment over time through that 2020-21 period. The decline amounts to basically 1/5 of the student population over that past 11 years. So it was an ongoing trend. While we were doing interviews, we were hearing that it was an impact of the charter schools. And as you can see here, the charter school on this top graph is orange and the district's numbers were blue. And so I suppose, that this student population here could have otherwise come to the district. But as far as the district, it never took a significant hit because of the charter schools population. The charter schools population really would have been more than what the district already had. So we have a decline over that past 11 years of basically 1 out of every 5 students. And you can see every year the percentage decrease amounting to that total of 20.79%. The other issue that we had is that a lot of school funding is not based on enrollment, and the district does a really good job of monitoring enrollment. But what we found through interviews was that the district is not monitoring average daily attendance, and that really drives the local control funding formula and also other funding sources. So it was being reviewed at first interim and second interim, but just because a student shows up doesn't mean they have that seat time to support receiving the revenue. There is a little, a nuanced difference there. So while monitoring enrollment is important, monitoring that average daily attendance, because that's your tie to finance, really is also of utmost importance. And so we have that it was being monitored at the interim reporting periods, but really we recommend that happen at least once a month, because the sooner that can be identified, if you don't have students, with seat time, is there some reason that can be identified that can be remedied, or, is there, do we just need to adjust our budget, or, find where that proper balance is? But that is also something that, again, increased the risk for a school district. Moving on to internal controls and fraud prevention. This is an area that we really saw a change from the prior report. And I have to, give you a round of applause, because internal control is not everyone's favorite topic, right? It's basically the system of processes and procedures that prevent one single staff member or some other person that has access to district resources from basically taking or stealing resources, misappropriating them. And so implementing internal controls in a small office can be a very hard thing to do. And in the prior report, we actually saw, I'm going to scroll down here, things in some of these areas like payroll and human resources that did get fixed. But what we found this time is that on the fiscal side, we have conflict now with one person having access to, for example, let me see here, right? That one actually had to do with terminations, but we have like a person in accounts payable that also has access to purchasing. So that would allow a person to, for example, grant a purchase order to a company and then also write the check to that company all on their own potentially. And the risk there, as an example, again, is that I can set up myself as a company or a friend as a company, write a purchase order, pay myself, and there's no control there. So these things are not about the people. I want to reiterate here. it's not about the people you have in place. It's about safeguarding the district over time and having the proper processes and controls in place to safeguard the district, regardless of who's in that position. So this is something that we see often in districts, and it's always an ongoing process, because it's, the daily work that's happening. Sometimes people think it's a shortcut, or, hey, you've already been trained and, it's just going to be easier for you to do that, things like that. And it actually can decrease the protection against fraud. So we've noted these items here, but that is why internal controls actually was our top percentage in the report. But again, that's an ongoing thing that you can continuously work through. This top one here, just as a little sidebar on that, has to do with when an employee resigns or changes positions. You can have, sometimes the controls are so complex in a financial system that we take a shortcut and we say, hey, give person B the same access that person A had, or person A is moving into a new position. Can you add this access? And what ends up happening is they have access to too much. And it's not about the person. In fact, when I find myself in those positions, I often will bring up that conversation and say, hey, I don't want the risk, because now it makes it look like I could have done something when, I had no intention, in case something else happens. And then, you're looking at everybody who has access. So it not only safeguards the employee, but it also safeguards the district. Okay. The next section is leadership and stability. The primary one in here, and it was so close. We look at the stability of the leadership within the district, and that's defined as, has the CBO and the superintendent been there for more than 2 years? And what we find is that when districts have stability in these positions, there's a common leadership usually being passed through the ranks. There's consistency. And so the CBO was just approaching 2 years. When the first FHRA was done, that person was new in the position. So you also had a no there. And now we're back, kind of without a chief business official, we have a no again. The challenge again is that when we don't have someone in this position, it's kind of like, it's just a hole in that leadership. We don't have the consistency. So if we have someone in there and they have 2+ years, then we've got that focused pathway, especially if we're dealing with fiscal distress. We've got that focused pathway. We've got a plan. We've got the buy-in from the leadership. We've been able to talk with our staff and other stakeholders, and we've got that buy-in to move forward. So it's super important as something that we look at to find that stability in these two positions, because they are two very strong leadership positions within the district. As a couple of other points, I just have 2 other items in here that are notable. One was 2.7, does the district budget and expend restricted funds before unrestricted resources? I'm going to scroll down here. You can see that we have a no and an explanation here. The challenge that the biggest concern that we had in here is that if this is happening, if the district is watching their restricted funds, which means all the funds that come in that say, you can use these funds, but you have to meet these conditions, right? They're not unrestricted for anything. They say, hey, you can have these funds, but we have to spend them in Title I schools, or we have to, they'll have some conditions on them. And usually there's also a reporting condition back. So what happens is, if we're really monitoring those well, and we're spending those, we're aware of what those balances are. And so what we found through our detailed review is that there were actually funds that the district was at risk of having to send back. If they hadn't been expired or encumbered or expended by June 30th, then those funds would have had to go back. And so if we're spending that most restricted dollar first, then we have these dollars would have been spent, and then we wouldn't have had that concern. So we just kind of wanted to highlight that while the district did improve on this over the prior one, I want to say this was a no in the prior one. This was something that we did find that it's just a reminder, every dollar counts, and we need every dollar in education. And so we don't want to send anything back, right? And so we had that little technical thing. And then on another one, we had our actual revenues and expenses consistent with the most current budget. We had found that per the first interim, there was one item that was a major item, it's roughly $338,000 that was less, the amount expended was already over the budget amount at first interim. And so we talked about it, and then we had heard, okay, we're going to increase that at second interim. And then at second interim, even though this report was based on first interim, we did, kind of watch that to be able to say, yeah, it wasn't as the first interim, but it's been resolved. And what we found was it was actually still below that expenditure. Now, a challenge like this might have multiple causes. It may be that it's just not being monitored because too many other things are, on their plate, or it might be that there's not a great process in place to project this. It could be that the actuals weren't being coded correctly. There's lots of reasons that something like this can happen, but this technical thing would be this technical accounting process here is something that's important, because if we see that there's a major item here, usually things through payroll can be reasonably reliably projected. And if we see that something's not being projected well, then we kind of start wondering, okay, what other things might pop up at the end of the year when we do unaudited actuals that we didn't have projected. So we may project that we're going to have an ending fund balance, and now it's either swinging, significantly above or below, instead of kind of honing in and being able to speak to our actual activity and project that and have that reliable data so that or financial information so that we can make proper decisions based on it. So those were our major points. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to give you that summary here. At the end of the day, our result was a risk score of 31.8%. Which does put the district in that moderate risk category, which would have went up to 39.9. And again, the district was escalated to a high risk because of the 3 qualified interims that were in a row. But overall, that's kind of the results of our report and all of the major pieces that we wanted to report on. To note, if you have any questions, I think we have time. We can field questions right now if there are any questions from the board. This report will also become available on the FCMAT website tomorrow morning after this board meeting. So.
Great, thank you so much for your report. Are there board questions on this item? Board questions? All right, any public comments or questions on this item? All right, well, thank you again. I really appreciate your work on this and your report to us tonight. And I think that is all for this evening on that item.
Thank you, FCMAT team. And also, I think I saw Michelle Henson, who is the SCO business person who assists us with all of our work. So thank you for your work on this and your support. And it's nice to see that we made some progress in some of the important areas, and hopefully as the enrollment shift happens, we'll be able to continue to benefit from that and make any other necessary adjustments and get to that positive certification. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. All right, we are now on item number 2, Division of State Architect Legacy Closeout Projects.
Yes, so the vacancy at C.A. Jacobs that we currently have allows us to officially notify through this resolution that we have a number of portables that we are not using. We will have to complete some fencing off of them. You've had several items come to you regarding the DSA closeouts. So some of the closeout issues are related, at least one of the closeout issues is related to these portables. So adopting this resolution will allow us to close out that connected item. So we're asking tonight for your approval of the resolution.
All right, board comments or questions on this item? Public comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion for this resolution.
I move to approve the resolution.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
There's a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote because it's a resolution. DJ?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa? Aye. Jewel?
Aye.
And I as well. That motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we are now on item number 3, John Knight Middle School renovation project, moving services ratification for contract increase.
Thank you. So we've been in front of you a couple times already with regards to Valley Relocation. It's the company that we contracted with for all of our moving issues related to the C.A. Jacobs to John Knight campus transitions. So we had some additional movement that we needed. It was related to some of the final furniture and equipment purchases. So tonight we're asking for the increase of $2,218 to the existing contract, all out of Measure Q funds.
All right, are there board comments or questions on this item? Public comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor of saying, approving the contract, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that motion passes. We are now on item 4, recognition of donors to the John Knight Fund.
Yes, thank you. So with the opening of the John Knight Middle School campus, with John's blessing, we created a fund that people could donate to support the purchase of things such as new athletic uniforms, murals or banners, other types of things to hang on the campus, spirit items. So essentially a variety of things which would help to make John Knight Middle School, John Knight Middle School. Colors, name, and logos, mascot, those types of things. So really happy to report that as of today, there have been $11,775 donated to the fund. And we wanted to make sure that we identified those who have contributed up to this point in time. And we'll continue to do this as we get more donations come in. So the list includes Cindy Moody Perkins, who is actually a former C.A. Jacobs principal. So we appreciate your support. Ray and Ann Lertora, Judith and James Tischer, Judith McKibben and Alexander Archimore, Michael and Joanne Banducci, James and Patricia Garrett, Cheryl Futrell, Robert Medeiros, Patrick and Susan Kennedy, Dan Pendergrass and Cynthia Berger, Kathleen and James Hawkins, a couple more, Burco Constructors, that's our contractor on the project, actually made a donation of $1,500. So we appreciate their support. James and Catherine Knight and the man himself, John Knight, made a contribution to the fund. So we really appreciate the support here. And as we complete all the transition of C.A. Jacobs, our middle school from the C.A. Jacobs moniker and identity to the John Knight one, these funds will help us with that substantially. So thank all of the donors.
Great, thank you. Yes, thanks to all of the donors for your support. Any board comments or questions on this item?
I bought one of those shirts, so I'm ready to look snazzy in it.
Nice.
There you go.
I will say, my daughter's playing volleyball there, and their volleyball jerseys are pretty neat.
Good.
I don't know what's the word now. It's not rad, but
No, it's definitely not rad.
Not cool, yeah.
but they're very nice. In fact, some of the girls who graduated high school reminisced at what their jerseys looked like when they were in CA, and they were a little jealous. So
Yeah.
they're very nice.
Yes. Would chill be acceptable, you guys? You have some students in the room. Chill, that's old too.
I mean,
Yeah.
I could use some words that my kids use,
They're
but it
lit.
would embarrass my kids.
They're
so.
Lit, right?
Are they lit?
Yeah, are they lit? I'm banned from using any of those words. but-
This old man lost a pool years ago, so.
You're
still very cool, sir.
Excellent.
We've got the greatest kids in Dixon. don't we?
You didn't ask for public comment.
Yeah, any other public comment? Any other public comment on this item? All right. Well, thanks again to all the donors who participated in that. And we are on item number 4, update of board policies and administrative regulations.
Yes, so this is the first of 2 sets of policies to introduce you to tonight. Again, our practices will bring these back at our next meeting for your approval. And as is my practice, I will run through the list and just give you a very brief sense of the topic and why the change has been established. So board policy 0420.42, that's on charter school renewals. And there's a new law, there's two elements of new law under SB 98, which amend the criteria for renewal. So this is based on new law. Board policy 3110 on transfer of funds. This is also based on new law, SB 98. And it relates to deferrals of payments owed to districts. Board policy 3230 on federal grant funds. This is an update tied into new federal regulations that became effective late last year. And some of the audit requirements for federal awards are involved in that. Administrative regulation 3230, so that's tied to the board policy. And this reflects the change in the regulations that I just mentioned. Administrative regulation 3311.2 is on leaseback contracts. That's something we had a lot of talk about back in the day as we were working on the John Knight Middle School project. So this is new law as well, and it's related to bid documents in leaseback situations. Administrative regulation 3311.3 essentially is tied to the same piece of legislation, and this is on design build contracts. So the more traditional method of contracting on facilities. Administrative regulation 3320 is on claims and actions against the district. And the regulation includes some updated information and is based on a new law, SB 1473. Board policy 3452 on student activity funds. This policy is just a clarification, actually, related to school connected organizations that are not composed entirely of students. So these tend to be fundraising agencies, fundraising clubs or organizations. In your packet, I would just note that board policy 3515.3 and the related administrative regulation, we're not taking action on. In the next set, we do have something on police. These two policies are if the district has its own police department, its own police force, which obviously we do not. Board policy 3600 on consultants. So this is also based on new law. Actually, there's 3 different references to that new law here, and it's related to some case law as well with relation to independent contractor or employee status. We have an exhibit 4112.9 and subsequent others on employee notifications. And this is just an update on the notifications that we must provide to our employees on an annual basis. Administrative regulation 4161.2 and then 42 and 43. Let's just cover the other groups. This is again new law, which provides extended leave opportunities for victims of domestic violence and some other criminal acts. The administrative regulation 4161.8 and subsequent reflects new law around family care and medical leave rights. Board policy 6142.8 is on comprehensive health education. So that reflects new curriculum frameworks related to health education. The administrative regulation tied to that just reflects that the state standards for injury prevention and safety are also an area of focus. And finally, in this set, board policy 7210 on facility financing is just reflective of an update related to the Leroy F. Green School Facilities Act and some debt issuance and management areas. So that is that first set, and I'd be happy to take any questions that there are on it.
Any board questions on the first set of regulations and policies? All right, any public comment on the first set of board policies and regulations? Seeing none, this is not an action item, so we'll move on to the second set. If you thought that was fun, you've got more coming up.
Right.
Let's do it.
Maybe I'll do this one with an Irish accent.
Do it.
Just-
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
recognize my heritage and have a little entertainment. So, and this one is just about as lengthy, so I'll try to keep it moving. So again, the vast majority of these are tied to changes in law or regulations. So the first one, regulation 1312.3 on uniform complaint procedures is just an update regarding timeline for those procedures. Board policy 1313 on civility is a new policy that CSBA has prepared and made available to districts. And essentially, this is a policy that calls for civility regardless of how difficult the topic is. And certainly we've had some recent experience that could be clear evidence that this policy is worth having, both to promote the kind of behaviors we want and to stop the kind of behaviors that we don't want, and that's some of which we've seen recently. So board policy 3511.1 on integrated waste management covers some of the issues related to recycling. You have the administrative regulation, which puts those standards into practice. The board policy 3515.31 on school resource officers, and this is a new policy as well. And what it does is creates expectations related to school districts that do contract with a police department for school resource officers or similar services. And the emphasis here is that the work of the school resource officers be proactive and include de-escalation techniques, that the clarity that school resource officers should not be handling routine disciplinary matters, that SROs should get specialized training and such. And so with this one, I did take our memorandum of understanding that we have with the city of Dixon for our our school resource officer program. And I found a really strong alignment with what this policy asks for in terms of the nature of the services that we get. And so I'm very comfortable tonight bringing this to you with the policy as is, because I do believe it reflects the program that we have. Also going to get scheduled for October. It's typically been an annual meeting, but it didn't happen last year. But Adrienne Lauder and myself with our resource officer, his sergeant, the captain that oversees the program, and the chief, just to do a check-in on where we are. And later in the year, we would come, as we've done in the past, and do a report on the services that we've gotten through the resource officer. Okay. Next is 4112.42, and this one is on bus drivers. So it's not relevant for us, as we do not have bus drivers in our system, in our program. Next is 4141 and 4241 on collective bargaining agreements. And this just clarifies that law preempts or trumps bargaining agreements, is what is involved there. Employee security, which is 4158, and both in a board policy and the administrative regulation is related to restraining orders with violence and guns, domestic violence, etc. So this is intended to provide additional safety and security for employees. Board policy 5141.4 on child abuse prevention and reporting. This updates and clarifies some standards related to age-appropriate education around child abuse to help our students be safer. You have the related administrative regulation there as well, and this is all based on one piece of law and one new state regulation. So board policy 5141.52 on suicide prevention. So this is an update to an existing policy related to best practices for suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention tied to the CDE standards. You have the administrative regulation that accompanies that. You have the safe safe routes to school program and board policy and administrative regulation 5142.2. And this helps to clarify some issues around liability and the benefits of positive impacts on student achievement of the Safe Routes to School program, which ideally includes student participation there. Board policy 5145.12 on search and seizure. And that's related to conditions upon which a search can occur for a student who leaves the campus during the day and returns. Board policy 5145.9, hate motivated behavior. So this increases or bolsters our commitment to providing a positive environment and addressing hate behavior in the strongest terms possible. With 5148, both board policy and administrative regulation, this reflects a new law related to preschool programs. We do not run a full-fledged preschool program as some districts do, a state preschool program, but we do have a program, an internal program that comes close enough to that this policy is appropriate for us. Board policy 6142.5 on environmental education, and just clarifies some of the expectations and standards related to that. Administrative regulation 6162.51 addresses some updated information on CAST testing and science testing and CAST testing as well. Board policy 7211 on developer fees provides some clarification related to the process of addressing increases or potentially decreases in developer fees, and the administrative regulation attached to this one deletes some board responsibilities that are now covered in that board policy. So after that scintillating presentation, I'll take any questions that anyone has.
Is there any board there? There's a board question. Look at that.
I'm glad that we, Superintendent Dolan and I had a conversation about SROs previously, so I'm glad I got more detail about it. Just in reference to the board policy 3515.31 about SROs, you said like you liked how it was written. There's just one sentence in here that I don't know if this is how the district feels. So I'm just curious, I guess. It's the I think second sentence. It says the policy encourages districts to redirect resources currently allocated to contracts with local law enforcement into student support services. So it kind of sounds to me like slowly begin to redirect funds paying for an SRO towards something else. And I'm not sure if I'm misreading that or
Is
if that's,
that in the note? AJ, or is it in the actual language?
that is in the notes, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
the guide sheet. Yes.
Okay, yes. So when you read the policy itself, it does not go that far.
Okay.
You know, I think there's certainly been a lot of conversation about policing in this country and about policing and schools. And you've seen a variety of districts across the state and country that I'm most familiar with in the state. Some have disbanded their district police forces. Others have removed all school resource officers. They've cut funding and severed the relationship they have with their local police agencies. You know, I think even when we adopted this program, we approved it. The conversation then was about a school resource officer program is not the only way that we should be trying to foster responsible behavior from our students and safe campuses, right? And so when I saw that note, what it called to me was just continuing to evaluate and keep a balance between district programs and efforts and the support that we get through our school resource officer and the Dixon Police Department. I would say from my experience here, and I've got a recent principal back there and Adrian who oversees this, that our partnership with the Dixon Police Department and our school resource officer position has been overwhelmingly positive. We don't have complaints, we don't have issues where any officer's conduct or behavior is questioned. When you go on campuses, you see positive interactions between our officer and students on a campus. Many don't know him, but I think here in Dixon, we have a nice balance between what we're trying to do internally and getting the support. I'll tell you that one of the greatest benefits of having this position for us is having consistency and continuity in service, right? Because when you call dispatch, you get whoever is available, and this may be the third or fourth time that you're dealing with a student or a family or something like that. So you may have had 3 or 4 different approaches in addressing it. So the fact that we have one dedicated officer who's obviously not always available and things like that, but it provides a great level of service. Just that that site administrator can work with Officer Malone on the specifics of the situation, including bringing in supports and not just dealing with this in a law enforcement manner. I would tell you that if we asked Jason and we had previous data on the types of calls that were made to the schools through the SRO process, they're really not law enforcement calls, right? It's not where someone has broken. It's a support issue more than anything. So I hope that clarifies some of that. I don't think the board is. We're asking the board to commit to altering our agreement or anything in that nature. We do have the obligation to continue to review the program, and that's what our meeting does, and that's what coming to the board with a report annually does as well.
If I can just add, I know that I've heard lots of compliments about having the same officer there, and he's trained. And so he has a specialty of working with kids because he has extra training that other officers do not have. There have not been nearly as many complaints as there once were about those issues. And the other thing that I think is important too, that even because I was part of the team that helped negotiate that officer, but even since we've had the officer, we've poured a tremendous amount of money into mental health services and clinicians and other things too.
PBIS, right, all of
Yes,
those
to
things.
even offset maybe what that policy, what the notes might have said. And so I think we have a very good balance because I think we need to be well-rounded and all of that.
Can I add something, Brian?
Sure.
Okay.
Would you mind stepping a little closer,
Oh,
maybe to the podium, Adrian, so
Oh,
the
okay.
folks at home can hear you as well?
Yeah. Oh, over here.
Yes, sorry.
And yeah, I just want to comment on what Officer Malone has done. It has built not only, a connection with our students and with parents as well. So we have parents who will reach out to him directly. There's a higher level of comfort in working with Dixon PD since we've had Jason on board. And like Melissa had said, with the Jason services coupled with our mental health counselors, a lot of times what he's responding to are students who are maybe having a mental health crisis. Maybe they're having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, and we can bring Jason along, who's been trained to do that, as opposed to some of the officers don't have as much training as he has in working with young people. And I think Officer Malone coupled with our mental health clinicians, it's just, we're able to offer our families a much higher level of service. I really don't see his services to our district as being more, one who's there to monitor if there's issues and fights. Like for me, the biggest support that has come with an SRO has been the support to our kids who need that extra level of mental health services. You know, and an officer, there's a care when he's calling a parent and saying, listen, I don't want to transport your kid in the back of my police car to the emergency room. How can we do this together? And it's just been so valuable for our students. So, you know, we appreciate the board's continued support.
And that example that Adrian cited happened within the last week as one, a middle school student in crisis. And Jason was able to work with the family and make sure the student ended up in the right place to get some evaluation without, and I've been a part of it, I've seen it many times where a student is going away in the back of a police car, right? Not exactly what, I mean, certainly doesn't feel like a way to support a student who's in crisis. So that was just one recent example of some really good work.
Great, thank you. Other board questions? All right, any public comment or questions? All right, again, this was an information item, so thank you for that presentation, and we will move on to B1, the California School Dashboard Local Indicators presentation.
I think the way I'd like to do this tonight is if I could mute there and speak from the microphone on my computer, I think it would work a little bit better with the presenters, or what do you think?
I imagine that should work. Yeah, I don't know how that. I've not used that tonight, so until
Not easier to be on.
I can mute the owl. Someone will have to turn it back on when you're done.
You have to mute the speaker function too, so we're not getting feedback, right?
Correct.
Okay, can you hear me?
It might be just on the laptop itself.
Mark, can
I can't control the speaker from here, only I can mute it.
Okay, let's just. Okay.
Can you please turn the owl back on? Thank you. I'm sorry, Nick, I cannot hear you.
I didn't touch anything. Mark, can you
Thank
hear me
you.
now?
Thank
Got
you.
it?
Got it.
If you want to wheel the podium up a little closer, you may do that also, Mr. Chairman.
All right, here we go. Mark, you got me?
Mark.
I got you.
Great. Okay, so again, my name is Dick Germani, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. Tonight, we're here to talk about the Dixon Unified School District California School Dashboard, specifically the local priorities associated with that website. Real quick, a quick review of what the dashboard is. It's an online tool designed to help communities across the state access important information about the K-12 districts and schools. It's comprised of two elements, really. One is what are 6 state indicators, and you can see those listed there. And what that means is those are data points that are generated by the state based on the performance of Dixon Unified School District. We essentially send them the data, they process them, and they publish those on the website. It's also comprised of some what we call local indicators, which is what we're going to review tonight. So there are 5, and they are measured internally by the LEA. And we can designate ourselves as met, or not met for 2 or more years. And there's a standard by which these local indicators are defined. And one is, did we measure it? Doesn't say whether or not you were successful. It's, did you have some measure? And then did you report the findings for that measure out to the governing board at a regularly scheduled board meeting and to stakeholders and public through the dashboard? So that first one we're doing tonight, obviously, we're presenting that at a regularly scheduled board meeting. And then when we input this into the system and the dashboard becomes fully public, anticipated sometime in early December, then that's when it would happen at the dashboard level. So we'll talk about our first local indicator, and that is what's called basic services. This is otherwise known as the Williams Act requirements, and it's priority 1 of the 8 state priorities. It considers 3 things. Do we appropriately assign our teachers? And what do we do to fill those vacancies? Do students have access to instructional materials? We do a quarterly report on that, if you'll recall, as well as a yearly update, which we're going to do after this item. And lastly, are the district's facilities in quote good repair? So what do we find on this? Vast majority of our positions are filled by appropriately credentialed folks. We do have processes in place when we don't have vacancies filled. And this is, as you know, very challenging during the current climate. The second one, as reported to the board consistently, we do have the required instructional materials. And lastly, our sites are in fair condition. And we're also working to update Anderson and CAJ specifically. So our local assessment of our Williams obligations are that we are at standard met. Now going to invite, or no, I'm going to invite myself. I'm going to invite a couple other people very shortly. Forgot this one is still mine. This second one is implementation of state academic standards. It's local priority 2. And the standards that we annually measure our progress in implementing state academic standards. So how do we measure here in Dixon Unified? There's a California Department of Education developed a self-assessment tool, which we utilized with our site principals. We conduct site visits for frequently in classrooms, and we also use something called the Avid Coaching and Certification Instrument, which Maria will talk about more in depth with one of our other local priorities. So what do we find? In areas where we've invested resources like English language development, elementary math, among others, implementation is high. We know we have room for growth in a number of areas, such as elementary social studies and our NGSS work, although we are making progress on those as well. And lastly, teacher and staff training is a critical component of this priority. So are we training our staff to be able to implement standards? The next part of this is how is this reflected in our LCAP? Okay, so this is part of LCAP Goal 1, which is our goal for academic achievement. We're going to measure this using our iReady assessment system, which is new to us this year. We're looking at student growth and how many hours they've logged using that assessment system. I can tell you that's off to a good start. We're going to continue to use that Avid instrument and our EL Achieve walkthrough tools, which is our designated ELD program. We'll continue to develop our staff, our RTI program at elementary to teach students who are falling behind in their reading. And lastly, we have some instructional coaches who all day long are helping us do this work in ELD, math, and instructional technology. So our local assessment of this item is standard met. Now, and we'll just kind of go through all of them, or shall we take them questions as they come? How do you want to do that?
Let's just go through all of them. We'll do questions at the end.
Okay, great. So next, I'd like to invite Chantel McCammon, and I'll let her introduce herself actually.
Hi guys, I'm Chantel McCammon.
Yes, what's your title?
My title is Coordinator of Outreach, Engagement, and Innovation. And it's good to see everybody in person. So as you see here on the slide, this is going to be about parent and family engagement. As you heard Mr. Giramonte say, with the previous priority, we do have, this is an area of growth for us. So we did a lot last year, I can say that, because it's based on last year, through the closure. And what our main purpose and goal is here is to get the input from parents and promote parental involvement and participation in our programs. With that, we did surveys out the wazoo on returning to in-person and what that would look like. We continue to have our ELAC and school site council meetings, continue to have DLAC meetings. We had phone calls, parent-teacher conferences, all of those things still occurred. Hello. Sorry. For those of you at home, the screen went out that I was looking on. I apologize. And so what we found is utilizing our parent liaisons and the office staff to make those phone calls to our students of the unduplicated count was super important and valuable. We needed to continue to do outreach to all of our families. That wasn't just an email or a phone call, but could have also been through the platforms of Remind, Class Dojo, School Messenger, both during the school day and outside the school day, and then just continuing with consistent communication overall. And in regards to whether or not we met this assessment locally, we did. And from that, we increased some areas, and one of which is my position. We expanded our parent liaison program and are continuing to develop in that area, our bilingual outreach and having activities there, and coming up with some new ways to help with parent education for activities, and of course, continuing with parent surveys. So thank you guys.
No, come on.
Up next is Adrian Lauder.
Good evening, board. My name is Adrian Lauder. I'm the Student Services Coordinator. I'm going to speak to Local Priority 6, School Climate. And so school climate is measured by our Healthy Kids Survey, which we administer every other year. And we have to focus on a grade level in each grade span. So we look at our 5th graders, our 7th graders, 9th graders, and 11th graders. And we look at our 9th graders and 11th graders also at our alternative ed school site. And so we show if we meet that goal when we administer the survey and then present that information to our board. And the last time we administered the survey was the 2019-2020 school year. And so we measure this in our LCAT by defining, we really focus on a question if our schools are perceived as safe or very safe by our students. And also we look at our school connectedness. And so what have we found? Our sites are working collaboratively to ensure that the PBIS structures are strong at each site. So we have very solid structures at our elementary school sites, and we are growing those structures at our high school sites, at our secondary sites. We have room to grow, but we are really moving at our secondary sites. Our teams, PBIS teams, took their expectations and modified those to fit a digital learning platform, a virtual learning platform. So they did a lot of work to modify that for students last year. Our mental health programs and social emotional learning programs monitored by my team, me and my team. We're assigning students with more care and efficiency. Our clinicians are leading social emotional learning groups for our elementary students. They're meeting with students individually, virtually. They did that virtually all last year and in person when needed. And then we utilize county partnerships to provide training in suicide awareness, social emotional learning, and connecting with students throughout the school year. All right, and how is this priority reflected in our LCAP? So we are going to continue to expand and manage and support the social, emotional, and behavioral services for our students. We will continue to utilize our mental health team, our school psychs, behaviorists, mental health clinicians to provide individual and group counseling at all of our school sites. We're also offering push-in support and social emotional learning groups at each site. Our partnership with Solano County Office of Education will also continue this school year with a focus on PBIS, as well as providing additional resources for our students with their social emotional learning groups in terms of intern support. We're going to continue to provide more training to our staff to effectively work with students who come from diverse backgrounds. We will continue to look at equity and how we can support our students and their social emotional growth. And then we will continue to provide professional development for our staff. We are looking at suicide awareness, youth mental health first aid. We are going to continue with our wellness series that we offered for both our classified and certificated staff. So, and we did meet the standard. And so I'm going to turn it over to Nick.
No, Maria.
Maria. Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Noel and members of the board. My name is Maria Lukine. I am Supplemental and Concentration Grant Coordinator for Dixon Unified. So for local priority 7, we're looking at a broad access for students to a broad course of study. And the standard is for us to annually measure progress toward ensuring that our students have access to and enrolled in a broad course of study. The way that we primarily do this is through the AVID coaching and certification instrument. You may be familiar with this document. It is a pretty sizable document that now analyzes our instruction, systems, leadership, and culture at all of our sites. Within the CCI, we look at academic support structures that are in place at all of our sites to give students access to a rigorous curriculum. We look for conflicts in master schedule to make sure that our students are able to take courses of rigor and of support whenever needed. We look for things like open access to AP and honors courses, enrollment in college preparatory courses at the high school level, as well as ensuring completion of A through G requirements in our high school students. And finally, having access for our teams to ongoing professional development for teachers and leaders to support implementation of the system. We also use an observation and self-reflection tool through our systematic ELD curriculum. So in using those tools, what we found is that we continue to have open access to AP courses with a high number of students enrolled. We also found, and this is key, the demographics in those AP courses closely reflects the student population at Dixon High School, and there are few master schedule conflicts. Another key finding is that nearly all of our English learners are enrolled in a designated ELD course that is tailored not only to their grade level, but also their English proficiency level. This is something that I am very proud of. This is not something that most districts are able to do. There are significant resources that go into ensuring that this happens at every grade level, and we were able to do this throughout the pandemic, thanks to our EL team, which was, it was a difficult endeavor, but our commitment really showed. Our English learners performed extremely well in our LPAC this year. We also found that even though we do an incredible job with the English learners, we do have an access issue at John Knight Middle School. Students who are enrolled in the designated ELD program do not have access to electives. So if a student is an English learner, they take a designated ELD course because we're committed to serving their needs, but they are not able to enroll in an elective. This also holds true for special education students. If a student is enrolled in special education curriculum support, they do not have access to an elective. So that is definitely an issue. We also found that our elementary students have access to daily reading intervention when needed. The AVID elective has now grown to include grade 6. We have the AVID elective available for students in 6th through 12th grade. And there are PD opportunities for all staff throughout the year and in the summer months, both in person and virtual formats. This priority is reflected throughout goal 1 of our LCAP, as there are significant resources and services to support AVID, RTI, ELD, class size reduction, CTE access, AP, credit recovery, intervention process, tutoring, and professional development. So using the CCI as the backbone of this, we have rated the standard as met.
And that concludes our presentation, and our team will be willing to answer any questions that you might have.
Board questions? Go ahead, Judy.
The access issue that Maria brought up, I assume that happens because there's a 6-period day at JKMS, but a 7-period day at Dixon High.
You got it.
Is there an interest in resolving that?
Yes.
You're not going to propose solutions right now live? Okay, that's fine.
It requires negotiation.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yeah.
I was thinking 0 period, honestly, but I don't know, it's not going to solve all the problems. I'm not going to show up at 6 in the morning.
Yeah, because you're still talking about access issues in terms of transportation and so many other things. Yes, so this is a deep concern of ours at this point in time, and a complicated, as you can imagine, or understand already, a complicated issue to negotiate, but it is high in our priority list of things to tackle at the table.
I was gonna ask that, they still do have PE, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's not true elective, but because it's mandated or whatever, but
Right.
at least there's something, you know,
Yes.
quote unquote fun. I don't wanna, you know. but yeah.
We like to think that fun happens all day long.
You like to think that.
I like to think that, yes.
All right.
On there,
other-
it's fine.
Other board questions? No, public comment or questions? in This presentation, great. All right, we will move on then. That was a discussion item. We'll move on to our public hearing on instructional materials. So I'm going to now end the public hearing. And we can begin.
Okay, so this public hearing is regarding our instructional materials compliance as described a little bit earlier in the meeting around Williams. And shortly, we're going to ask you to adopt a resolution determining that we have sufficient instructional materials for all of our students.
All right, any questions on the introduction? All right, then we're gonna move on to the resolution on instructional materials compliance.
Okay, so we ask that the board recognize the resolution that we have instructional materials for all of our students. I will point out that the county a couple of weeks ago paid us a visit to monitor that specifically at both Anderson and Gretchen Kids schools. And there were no findings with regard to instructional materials. And we have our instructional materials, and in any case that we don't, we have processes in place to mitigate that expeditiously for our students.
Excellent. Are there any questions, board questions or comments on the resolution? Public comments or questions on the resolution? All right, seeing none, we will do, I'll entertain a motion on the resolution. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. BJ?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
And I as well. That resolution passes and we'll close the public hearing.
If I may, really quickly, I just want to recognize three people who did so much work to make sure that we're in compliance with this. Patricia Ortiz, Denise Diaz, and Telly Gutierrez, three of the Ed Services Office, who just did a phenomenal job in doing this work. So thank you to them.
Thank you for that presentation. All right, we are on agenda items for future meetings. Are there any board members who have agenda items for future meetings? Seeing none, we are on board announcements. Is there anyone who has a board announcement?
I have one.
All right.
Well, it's not really an announcement, it's more like a statement, but I've been thinking about this for the last several weeks, and based on some of our events that have taken place, I just felt like there was some thoughts that I needed to share to the public. And I'm not going to speak for the board, but I'll speak for myself. But I will say this, that the people that are up here serving the community work hard. They care about our community. They care about our students. They care about our staff. That's why I think that we're all up here, and now I'll just speak for myself. I think that serving in the community is an important thing. I teach it to my kids, and I just want to talk about masks for just a second. I hate them. They're annoying. I think that there's probably not one person in this room who's jumping up and down about wearing a mask. But I will say this. There's a reason why we go to open heart surgery, that the surgeon wears a mask. It's to keep us safe from germs and to keep patients safe. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and hopefully we'll be at a point where we might be able to return back, not to the new normal, but to the normal. As a parent, I'm really grateful that my kids are back in school with masks because they're learning and they're getting out of their bedrooms and they're getting out of sitting all by themselves. And so at this point, I was willing to do whatever it takes. And you know what? I have a lot of friends that feel differently than that, and they keep their kids home with them so they don't have to wear masks at school. And that is their ability that they can do. But from what I see when I go to a campus, I see that kids are happy to be on campus. And so I just wanted to share a conversation I had with my kids. As you know, when I have two teenagers, at home now. And as a parent, sorry kids, but as a parent, we're always trying to help our kids not to feel so entitled with things. And so, and I try to instill with my kids about thinking about others and instilling. And one conversation that we had recently is, you know, that these masks aren't always about us, that they're about other people. And I have a kiddo who's had COVID, and you know what, it is really hard to make up the work. He is working his buns off to try to make up for the 2 weeks he missed from school. And now, for anyone who knows me, knows what kid, because I didn't keep it general neutral, but they're really working hard to make up, and it is really hard to keep up with all activities, plus make up, keep regular work, and to keep up the 2 weeks that they missed as well. So the conversation I had with my kids is, you know, while my kiddo was home, he still got to eat. He has that blessing, and I believe that all of our students have different trials. My kids have trials, but one thing that I was trying to teach my kids is that we have students that come to school and they eat at school, and those are their meals that they get. And we have kids that come to school to escape home problems. And so it's our obligation to help those students stay at school as well by wearing masks. And I kind of think that my kids' minds turned a little bit, just not thinking about that, because sometimes we just think about how uncomfortable we are versus thinking about other people. And so as much as these are annoying, and this may be a very unpopular statement based on some of the conversations that have taken place in this room, but I will certainly stand by it that, you know, and I will say this time and time again, if we just think about other people and think what we can do to serve other people, our world will be such a better place. And so I don't know if anyone wants to share those thoughts with their kids in this process, but it's just something else to think about. And I know that we have very difficult situations and very difficult things that we have to deal with on a daily basis. But if we could just try to do it with civility and kindness and just try to think about other people, then I think that we'd be able to get a lot more accomplished. And that's all.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Great. Any other, DJ, go ahead.
I would just like to say it is 16th of September, which is Mexican Independence Day. So happy Independence Day to anyone celebrating today.
Thank you. All right, any other board announcements, comments, thoughts? All right. We are on coming events. October 7th, we'll be back here for our next board meeting. October 11th, we will all be off for a local holiday, and October 21st, we'll have a board meeting as well. With that, this meeting is adjourned.